Victor Newman had survived countless betrayals, boardroom battles, and near-fatal blows, but nothing in his long, war-scarred life prepared him for the moment his own wife, Nikki Newman, the woman he had fought for, forgiven, rescued, rebuilt, and cherished through decades of love and destruction, would stand over him with a trembling hand, watching the color drain from his face as he clutched his stomach in searing pain, unaware that she was the one who had put the poison in his drink, the one who had made the calculated decision to take him down long enough to steal something far more valuable than money, shares, or secrets, his revolutionary AI program, the undisclosed technological crown jewel designed to secure the Newman legacy for the next century, a system powerful enough to reshape the industry, control markets, analyze human behavior, and change the entire direction of their corporate empire. It had been locked away, hidden behind codes only Victor knew, protected by layers of cybersecurity even J.T. Hellstrom couldn't crack, the kind of weaponry Victor himself insisted he would only reveal when the timing was perfect. But Nikki had other plans, and all of them began the moment she learned what Jack Abbott stood to gain if she delivered Newman's prototype into his hands. Now, as Victor stumbled toward the desk in his office, breathless and confused, Nikki watched the wave of agony wash across his face, watched his fingers splay desperately across the polished mahogany as he tried to steady himself, and for a brief, tortured moment she nearly broke, nearly confessed everything, nearly screamed for help, but she didn't, because betrayal, once tasted again after so many years of swallowing her pride, once fed by resentment and fear, had turned into something intoxicating and irreversible. The poison wasn't lethal, she had never intended to end Victor's life, but it was potent enough to incapacitate him, to weaken him, to make him vulnerable in a way the world had never seen the mustache before, and Nikki, who had spent her entire marriage ricocheting between devotion and devastation, between trust and terror, between loyalty and humiliation, felt the tremor of her own heartbeat clash with the cold determination that had brought her to this moment. Victor, gasping and pale, tried to bark out her name, tried to roar with that signature Newman command, but the sound came out thin, strangled, a wounded version of the titan he had always been, and Nikki forced herself to take a single step back so she wouldn't crumble under the sight of him breaking. She murmured soft, innocent words, "Victor, what's wrong? Talk to me, what is it?" And the cruelty of pretending concern twisted inside her like a second poison, but she stayed committed, because every second of Victor's decline meant she was one step closer to doing something she once would have considered unthinkable, handing Jack Abbott the key to Victor's future. Meanwhile, Victor staggered forward, dropping to one knee as the pain radiated across his abdomen, sharp and punishing. He tried to reach for his phone, but Nikki casually nudged it farther away with the tip of her shoe, her pulse skyrocketing as the reality of her actions crashed into her. She had chosen this, chosen to blindside the man who had controlled every corner of her life, chosen to strike first before Victor inevitably unleashed consequences she feared would destroy everything she cared about, chosen to believe Jack's promise that the only way to level the playing field was by removing Victor's advantage before he could weaponize it. And Nikki, who had spent decades living under the shadow of Victor's power, had finally given in to the temptation of taking some of it for herself. With Victor down, breathing in painful, uneven bursts, Nikki forced herself to move fast. She bent, retrieved the small silver keycard from his pocket, the card that unlocked Victor's hidden lab beneath the Newman Tower, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Victor. I had to do this," though even she didn't know whether she meant it. She slipped away, heels tapping quickly against the marble, every step echoing like a countdown toward the moment she would cross the line she could never step back from. She rushed through the private elevator, heart pounding as it carried her downward into the depths of Victor's most secretive creation. When the doors slid open, the lab glowed with cold, futuristic light, sleek screens, dormant servers, encrypted terminals humming like caged storms, all of it built upon Victor's vision of turning Newman Enterprises into a technological empire no competitor could touch. Nikki's breath hitched at the magnitude of what she was about to steal. She typed in the keycard, input the passcode she had watched Victor enter 100 times and pretended never to memorize, and the AI program, the one Victor had spent months silently refining, revealed itself piece by piece, a cascade of digital brilliance dancing across the screen like a living, thinking organism. Nikki hesitated, a tremor running through her, because this wasn't just business, and it wasn't just betrayal. This was treason against the man she had loved more than any other person she'd ever known, a man she had married more times than she cared to count, a man she had stood by even when he lied, manipulated, controlled, and bent the world to his will. But the memory of Jack's desperation, the way he whispered that Jabot was on the brink, that Victor's secret AI would crush them all if it remained in his hands, pushed her forward. Jack had looked at her like she was his last lifeline, and Nikki, long accustomed to being Victor's shadow, had felt the strange, dangerous thrill of being someone else's salvation. A few keystrokes later, the AI program downloaded onto a secured drive. Nikki slipped into her purse. She wiped her fingerprints, erased the logs, and shut down the system, leaving no trail, just as Jack had asked, because Jack Abbott had made it sound like justice, like balancing decades of corporate warfare, like finally taking something from Victor instead of constantly losing to him. And Nikki, despite knowing she was walking willingly into another war, chose Jack. When she emerged from the elevator, Victor was still on the floor of his office, gripping his stomach, trying to drag himself toward the chair as sweat poured down his face. His voice cracked as he tried to speak, tried to tell her to call someone, tried to make sense of the betrayal his body already suspected. Nikki didn't move to help him. Instead, she whispered, "I wish you hadn't forced my hand," and walked out, leaving Victor Newman, the mustache, the unbreakable force of Genoa City, staring after her with broken, disbelieving eyes. Nikki crossed the parking garage and slipped into her car, hands shaking as she drove across town toward Abbott Manor. Every mile felt like another betrayal, another vow shattered, another brick pulled from the foundation of her marriage. She wasn't sure if Victor would forgive her. She wasn't sure if she would forgive herself. But she kept going, because the momentum of her decision was now bigger than her guilt. When she arrived at Jack's, he was already waiting, pacing, anxious, terrified she hadn't gone through with it. But when she stepped out of the car and held up the secured drive, Jack's entire expression shattered with awe, relief, and something dangerously close to gratitude. "Nikki, you actually did it," he breathed, and she nodded with a solemn weight that made Jack fall silent. He stepped close, touched her arm gently, and whispered, "You just changed everything. You don't know what this means." Nikki, exhausted, felt tears burn behind her eyes as she answered, "I know exactly what it means." What neither of them realized was that Victor, once the poison began to wear off, would remember every blurry detail, the way Nikki hovered just far enough away not to help him, the cold steadiness in her eyes, the absence of fear when he collapsed. And Victor Newman did not forgive betrayal. Not from enemies. Not from rivals. And especially not from Nikki. He would rise again, as he always did, fueled not only by the pain in his stomach but the deeper wound ripping through his heart, igniting a fury he hadn't unleashed in years. And when Victor discovered the AI program was gone, stolen from his inner sanctum, taken right under his nose by the woman he trusted most, the war that followed would eclipse every feud, every alliance, every scandal Genoa City had ever seen. Because Nikki Newman had not just stolen technology. She had stolen Victor's power. She had handed Jack Abbott the one weapon Victor never intended anyone else to touch. And in doing so, she had rewritten the rules of their marriage, their rivalry, their entire world. Victor Newman would rise. Nikki Newman would spiral. Jack Abbott would prepare for the storm of his life. And Genoa City would never be the same again, because Nikki's poison had done more than drop Victor to his knees. It had awakened the darkest version of him the world had ever known. Victor Newman lay on the cold floor of his office far longer than any titan of his stature should have, his breath shallow, his muscles trembling as the poison slowly loosened its grip on his system, but the physical pain paled in comparison to the psychological earthquake detonating inside him as the truth settled like shattered glass around his mind. Nikki had done this. Nikki, the woman who had walked beside him through every scandal, who had survived alcohol, grief, love affairs, separation, reconciliation, and war, had looked him in the eyes as he collapsed and walked away without a flicker of hesitation. It was not just betrayal, it was strategy, intention, premeditation, and Victor, even in his disoriented haze, could feel the rupture between them like a nerve torn in half. He finally managed to push himself upright, gripping the edge of his desk, sweat dripping down his face as he forced his body through sheer willpower to obey him. The moment he got enough stability to stand, he staggered toward his hidden console, his heart pounding in dread before his mind even fully formed the thought. If Nikki had done this, she had not done it for money, nor revenge, nor panic. She had done it for someone. She had done it for Jack Abbott. The realization cut sharper than the poison itself, and by the time Victor accessed the lab logs, by the time he saw the digital fingerprints erased, the download history wiped clean, the internal AI registry now empty, the rage erupting in him was volcanic, primal, a force that could level empires. Victor slammed his fist against the desk, ignoring the pain radiating up his arm, and growled, "Jack, you son of a," before the sheer fury stole his voice. He stumbled back, gripping his stomach, and muttered with raspy breath, "Nikki, what have you done to us?" Meanwhile, across town, Nikki stood in Jack's living room, tremors still running through her body as the adrenaline drained and the overwhelming weight of her decision began pressing down on her like an avalanche. Jack, however, was vibrating with anxious energy as he plugged Victor's secured drive into his encrypted system. The moment the screen lit up with Newman-coded files, Jack exhaled with a mixture of triumph and disbelief, his eyes widening as the AI interface displayed its initial diagnostics like a creature coming to life. "My God. Nikki, this is even more advanced than I anticipated," he whispered, almost reverently, and Nikki flinched at the awe in his voice because it reminded her exactly what she had done. She had stolen Victor's life's work and handed it to the one man Victor despised more than anyone alive. Jack continued, "This could change everything for Jabot, everything for the Abbotts. Nikki, you didn't just give me a tool, you gave me a future." But Nikki didn't feel victorious. She felt hollow. Empty. Something inside her had cracked wide open, and she didn't know if she could ever seal it again. She sat down, rubbing her temples as Jack went on about possibilities, expansions, new divisions, protective strategies to keep Victor from retaliating. But Nikki whispered, barely audible, "You don't understand. Victor is going to come for both of us. He's going to burn the world down to get this back." Jack paused, looked at her, and for a moment the triumphant businessman was replaced by the man who once loved her deeply. "Nikki, I would never let anything happen to you," he promised. But Nikki couldn't bring herself to believe it. Because Victor Newman was not a storm one braced for. He was an extinction event. Back at Newman Enterprises, Victor pressed the intercom with shaking hands and barked, "Get my doctor here. Now." His voice was still raw, but the power behind it was unmistakable. Victor was in pain, but he was far from defeated. He sat in his leather chair, his breathing evening out as he replayed every detail of Nikki's behavior over the past weeks, the distance, the tension, the strange quietness whenever he mentioned the AI program, her sudden need to protect the family, the sharpness in her eyes whenever Jack's name came up. He should have seen it. He should have anticipated it. Love had blinded him in ways business never had. And for Victor Newman, weakness was unforgivable, in others, and especially in himself. As he waited for the doctor, Victor accessed the Newman surveillance feeds, and though Nikki had covered her tracks well, there was one damning piece of evidence she couldn't erase, the time-stamped elevator logs showing her descending to the restricted level after he collapsed. Victor stared at it, jaw tightening, his heart pounding with an ache deeper than betrayal. "Nikki, why?" he murmured, but the question wasn't truly seeking an answer, it was a vow. When the doctor arrived and confirmed Victor had been poisoned with a non-lethal but potent compound, Victor dismissed him with icy resolution. He didn't tell the doctor the truth. He didn't tell security. He didn't tell his children. This wasn't a family matter. This wasn't a business dispute. This was a war between a husband and a wife, and Victor planned to win it with surgical precision. At the Abbott mansion, Nikki tried to steady herself with a glass of water, but her hands shook so violently she spilled half of it. Jack placed a firm hand on her arm, sensing her unraveling state. "Nikki, listen to me. You did what you thought was right. Victor has pushed you, threatened you, undermined you for months. You made a choice, and we'll face whatever comes next together. Nikki wanted to believe him, but the truth was clawing through her chest. She wasn't sure she had done the right thing. She wasn't even sure she had done it for the reasons she had convinced herself. Was it to protect Jabot? To protect Jack? To stop Victor from escalating his AI into something dangerous? Or was it something darker, a buried resentment she hadn't acknowledged until now? She closed her eyes, but the image of Victor collapsing replayed over and over, tormenting her. She whispered, "He's going to hate me. I've broken us, Jack. I've broken the one bond one always said I would protect." Jack stepped closer, lifting her chin gently. "Victor broke that bond a long time ago. You just finally stopped pretending it wasn't shattered." But as comforting as Jack wanted the words to be, Nikki felt their truth sting. Across town, Victor made a call, one he rarely made, one reserved for moments so catastrophic they shattered the boundaries of business and family. "Michael Baldwin," Victor said when the attorney answered, his tone dark and lethal. "I need you at the ranch. Now." Michael hesitated, sensing the gravity behind the order. "Victor, what's going on?" Victor's voice dropped even lower, a growl of controlled fury. "Someone has made a very serious mistake. And I intend to correct it." When Michael agreed to come, Victor ended the call and leaned back, letting the rage settle into something colder, more methodical. He wouldn't confront Nikki with screaming or accusations. He wouldn't rush to reclaim the AI program. He would dismantle the betrayal piece by piece, uncover every thread, expose every accomplice. And when the time was right, he would not just get his program back. He would take back control of everything Nikki had tried to steal from him. Meanwhile, Nikki finally insisted on leaving Jack's, needing space, needing to breathe, needing to make sense of the chaos inside her. She drove aimlessly until she found herself pulling into the Newman ranch. The lights were low, the air heavy, the familiar sight of the home she shared with Victor now carrying the weight of her betrayal like a scar. She walked inside slowly, each step echoing with dread. She thought Victor might still be at the office, but when she reached the living room and saw him standing there, steady, upright, composed, but with an expression carved out of cold steel, her heart dropped to her knees. "Victor," she whispered, but he didn't move. Didn't speak. He simply watched her with eyes stripped of warmth. She stepped forward, tears forming instantly. "Victor, I can explain." But Victor raised a hand, a simple gesture, precise, commanding, and terrifying. "Nikki, not another word," he said softly, the softness more dangerous than shouting. She froze as he approached her, every step filled with the weight of a man who had been betrayed in the most intimate, unforgivable way. He leaned in slightly and murmured, "I know what you did. I know where you went. I know who you gave it to." The tears spilled over. "Victor, please. I didn't want to hurt you." Victor inhaled sharply, fighting the tremor of emotion beneath his fury. "You poisoned me," he said, voice cracking with fury and heartbreak combined. "You stole from me. You handed my future to Jack Abbott." Nikki sobbed, "I was trying to protect us, protect everyone. You don't understand, Victor. You were going to use that AI to..." But before she could finish, Victor's expression hardened into something unrecognizable. "I was going to use it to protect this family. And you were the one who destroyed it." The silence between them was suffocating. Nikki took a shaky breath, whispering, "Victor. I'm begging you. Don't let this be the end of us." Victor stepped back, his eyes cold as winter steel. "That decision," he said slowly, "is no longer yours to make." And with that, he turned away from her, leaving Nikki standing in the doorway of the home they had built together. Her heart shattering as she realized she had not merely betrayed Victor Newman, she had awakened the deadliest version of him. And when Victor Newman declared war, he never lost. Nikki stood frozen in the dimly lit living room long after Victor turned his back on her, long after his footsteps disappeared down the hallway, leaving behind a silence so heavy it seemed to swallow the entire Newman ranch in a suffocating grief. She clutched her arms around herself, trying to hold together the pieces of a heart that felt like it had splintered into shards the moment Victor uttered those unforgiving words. The reality of what she'd done, poisoning him, stealing from him, betraying him for Jack, struck her with the full force of a tidal wave now that she was alone with the ashes of her decisions. Her voice trembled as she whispered to the empty room, "What have I done?" But there was no comfort in the echo, no warmth left in the place she once considered her sanctuary. Upstairs, Victor stood at the window of their bedroom, staring out into the darkness, fighting the raging storm inside him. He had survived corporate coups, children turning against him, hostile takeovers, near-death experiences, and betrayals from enemies far more cunning than Jack Abbott, yet none of it cut as deeply as realizing Nikki, the woman he had forgiven more times than he could count, had intentionally taken him down. His jaw clenched as he replayed the sight of Nikki holding her purse just slightly tighter than usual, her eyes darting away from his when he mentioned the AI project earlier that day. He should have seen it. He should have known. But because it was Nikki, he had let his guard down. And Victor Newman would never forgive himself for that. Downstairs, Nikki wiped at her tears shakily, refusing to let herself collapse completely, because she knew Victor, knew what he was capable of when wounded, knew the cold, strategic ruthlessness that emerged when someone crossed him. She whispered to herself, "I need to fix this," though she didn't know how, didn't know where to even begin, because the line she had crossed wasn't just professional, it was marital, emotional, foundational. She had violated the core of what made them work, the fragile trust they kept rebuilding every time life tore them apart. Suddenly, the front door opened and Michael Baldwin stepped inside, startled to find Nikki instead of Victor waiting. "Nikki?" he asked cautiously, immediately sensing the emotional fallout. "Victor called me, is everything all right?"